past, patiently waiting. I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Yana Cabral, reporting for LatinPost.com, sitting here with Lin-Manuel Miranda. We have a series called Changing the Game, and it's about innovators and visionaries and groundbreakers. You are all three of those things.
Oh, well, thanks.
You have changed, really, Broadway. You have brought in the traditionalists, diversified the audience, and brought in young people, like a trifecta of things that every producer wants. So how did you do it?
You know, from one angle, this is a super old-timey traditional musical. It's a bio-musical about our founding fathers. The things that set it apart are a couple. One, Tommy directed a great production, and he got the best cast of actors I've ever seen, all on the same stage. Two, his thesis statement, which is, I want to eliminate any distance between a contemporary audience and Hamilton's story. So it's a story of America then told by America now. It's hip hop and R&B music, it's contemporary music in service of this story. It's a cast that looks like America looks like now. We've got period costumes, but they've just got a little twist to them. You know, Thomas Jefferson's purples are a little more Prince than 1789. Everyone's hairstyles are super contemporary, even though they're wearing period clothes. And that old and new mixture is, I think, what sets our show apart. It's hip-hop songs in service of a story that took place in the 1780s. It's a period costume with dreadlocks. It's that mixture of old and new that I think makes people both feel comfortable in our theater and also feel like they haven't seen this before.
So tell me a little bit about the process of getting it from reading Ron Cherno's book while you were in Mexico to the stage on Broadway and the hit that it is.
I grabbed that book at random from the biography section of a bookstore, and I didn't know Hamilton was an immigrant. I didn't know about his Dickensian early life. Father leaves, mother dies, lives with the cousin dies. It is such an unlikely story. And in that, it's like the story of our country. It's completely unlikely that this country exists, except that it does. And so I got to the part where Hamilton writes a poem about a hurricane that destroyed St. Croix. And people use this poem for collection efforts. And they take up a collection to get him an education in the colonies on the mainland. And I thought, that's hip hop. It's writing about your struggle and writing about it so well that you transcend your struggle, that you go to this other place and you're able to transcend your circumstances. And I had that insight, and then that kind of it's sort of like when you see a show and then suddenly you see the advertising everywhere. You know, I wasn't aware of the Phantom mask being all over New York until I saw Phantom. And then I was like, oh my God, it's everywhere. When I had that idea, oh, Hamilton's story is a hip hop story, it just kept popping up as I was reading the book. I was like, oh, he wrote under a pseudonym, like every rapper who ever existed. Oh, Washington was the Dr. Dre to his Eminem. He's the cosign that makes it okay for him to be able to have fights with Jefferson. He's like, well, I've got Washington, so I've got someone who has my back. I couldn't let go of the notion of the story of Hamilton intertwining with the story of hip hop and how it exists in our country and it exists in our world. And then that informed every other aspect of the production. Of course, it's a racially diverse cast. That's what hip hop is. I was casting hip hop artists in my head as I was reading the book. I wasn't picturing George Washington. I was picturing what R&B artist would Washington sound like if he were alive today?
And who would do this?
And who would do this? And so the initial inspiration kind of, and that initial impulse, we always tried to honor that impulse in every aspect of the production.
So going back a little bit to what I said before, the way you've changed Broadway, was it risky when you went to the producers and the money man and said, oh, so I want to do a hip hop version of Hamilton and it'll have this element and this element. Oh, and by the way, the cast is like all diverse.
Well, no, because I think what was exciting about this show is that the initial impulse led to what we made, and the people who signed on got it. You know, Jeffrey Seller got that that's what we were going to do. That's what made him excited about it. And I've been very lucky to work with producers, Jeffrey on this show, Jeffrey and Jill Furman and Kevin McCullum on Heights, who, you know, they understood Broadway needs to grow, and our audience, it's not about replacing the existing Broadway audience. God bless those people who make it their business and have the income to see every show. We need them to live. We love them. But for Broadway to continue, young people have to fall in love with the theater, and they have to be able to come see the show. And that's why we have a $10 lottery for our front row for every performance, so that young people can get in the door, and material that speaks to them. You know,
they see themselves.
And they see themselves, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing. We were saying a little earlier off camera, when I was doing my initial go-round with Heights before we found the producers we did, people would say, well, what are the stakes for Nina? Maybe she's pregnant, maybe she has a drug problem. You know, school is hard, is tough, but when you're a first-generation kid and your parents killed themselves and are working 10 jobs so that you can go to college, which was certainly true for me and was true for a lot of us, it's the most high-stakes thing in the world. So the fact that we were able to wrestle that story to the stage, I reap the dividends of that now, because when I speak at schools, people come up to me and say, I was Nina. I am the first in my family to go to college, and that show's about me. And that sense of identification is real. It's a real thing. And I felt that with Hamilton and with a lot of the characters in this show. You know, when you come from... when you see death at an early age and you think, oh, the clock's ticking, I think everyone leaves this show being like, oh my God, Hamilton lived 3 lifetimes in his 49 years on this earth. What am I doing with my life? I certainly felt that way when I read that book. When you read that he wrote 51 essays defending the Constitution in 6 months, I go, man, well, I got up and I watched a little football and I had some Cheetos. What am I doing with my life? I think that's the thing that people respond to in this show is what are we doing with the time we have on this earth? And that's a super universal question.
And that impetus that you have now or had before, how does that affect your family? You recently got married. You know, how does that affect your wife? Are you like a workaholic, or you know, or do you balance? Do you?
My wife and I are both workaholics. I was writing this on my vacations. I was writing this on breaks from my paid gigs. Hamilton would sneak into my brain when I wasn't working on other things and be like, write me, tell my story. And so, to her credit, she would say like, let's go on vacation, or let's go away for 2 weeks and I'll just be there for a week and then you just stay by yourself and write for another week. That was the way it happened, because the idea was too good not to exist, but carving out the time, my wife was super supportive in that endeavor, and this show exists because of her. Yeah.
So you were on the cover.
Oh!
Of the
I didn't know you were hiding that under your thing the whole time.
Of the summer issue of the New York Times. And one of the things that it says a lot about it and you and everything that they interview is who tells your story?
Right.
And that is a fundamental question.
Yeah.
Of this production, and probably also of In the Heights. So Lin-Manuel Miranda, who tells your story, and how do you do it justice, and how do you make it true to whoever you are? Well,
how do you make it true is the $1 million question, right? You know, there's a moment in our show where we see Hamilton meet his wife, and they go from courtship to marriage over the course of one song, which is actually not much shorter than how it actually happened. They met and were married 3 weeks later. Then we cut to her sister making the wedding toast, and we rewind the whole thing, and we see the entire courtship from her perspective. And we see everything we've just seen on stage from the perspective of the sister. And that, in a nutshell, is how history works. It's a fundamentally different story based on the teller. And that has repercussions both for how we view history, you know. And I also think of that in terms of my role as a writer. Honestly, at the end of the day, I'm thinking, what's the story that doesn't exist but should? In the Heights came out of me wanting a career in theater, but knowing I'm never going to play Bernardo because I don't dance that good. I don't look that good in tight black jeans. So how am I going to make a life in this business? Oh, I'm going to have to write a show that has Latino parts. And hopefully it could be a show where we're not gang members from the 50s. They did that about as well as it can be done. West Side Story is a total masterpiece. So where else can we go with the Latino experience on stage? And so, again, that notion of who tells your story, that's our job as writers. And our job, at its best, is to fall in love. You fall in love with a story that won't let you go. It's Hamilton whispering in my ear on my honeymoon and saying, write my songs, write my songs, write my songs, write my songs. It's the story of In the Heights and working with Kiara and finding the stories we had in common as kids of people who came here from other countries. And all right, well, then what does it mean to be us? What does it mean to be Puerto Rican if you don't grow up in Puerto Rico? And that being the fuel for the show, not trying to create the authentic Puerto Rican experience because it doesn't exist. It's super individual and personal, but you can only be as true to the stories you know and can tell. So that's who tells your story.
So going back a little bit about Game Changers, how do you feel about being called that, about changing Broadway? Really, like I said, there were so many young people when I was there.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see, and it was all different colors. And you don't see that often, if at all.
Yeah.
And so you are a groundbreaker because you've done this production so well, and it's made money.
Yes, that's the key.
Yes, it's made.
You know, what I will say is, what I love about theater, honestly, is that it's both embraces the new, but it's also our oldest art form. Mm-hmm. I love that because I love embracing tradition and I love learning from tradition and what works and what is in our bones as storytellers. So I don't think the effects of Hamilton. I think every show is a rock in the pond, and sometimes they go blip and they don't make a wave at all, and sometimes they make huge waves. And I'm hoping that the waves that Hamilton makes are, hey, look, a bunch of actors of color were on stage and they made money. And look, they don't look like the people they were classically cast as, and it didn't matter for a freaking second that they didn't look like that because it gave us so much more. By casting it the way they did. And what I'm excited about, you know, we've got 20,000 school kids coming to see the show over the course of the next year. They're going to pay $10 to see it. They're going to have matinees all of themselves a few times a year. I'm excited to see what that kid writes because for them, Hamilton has always existed. And it's just what musicals look like to them. So if Hamilton's your default musical theater experience, what are you going to make? And that's exciting to me. I'm curious to see what those kids create.
So final question.
Yes.
What is next for Mr. Miranda?
I've been writing this animated musical for Disney for the past year and a half. And, you know, I'm as here just as much because of Little Mermaid as I am because of Sondheim. And I've always, you know, I love those Disney classics, those musical animated classics, because you can go anywhere and you can make them do whatever you want. The world is your imagination. So I've been having a great time with my songwriting partners on that movie, and that comes out next November. So I'm writing songs for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who's the star of that movie, and that's a lot of fun.
What's the name of it?
It's called Moana.
Moana.
And it opens November 2016.
Okay, November 2016. Next project.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Diana Cabral for LatinPost.com. Thank you for watching.